It began with a horseshoe, cracked and rimmed with frost, lying askew in the snow just beyond the northern fence line. Eli Tanner almost overlooked it. The wind that morning was a biting blade, sharp enough to steal the breath from your lungs, and the sky was a blinding white that made your eyes sting. But Eli had a way of seeing what others missed, a trail of hoofprints fading into the drifts, a scrap of torn fabric caught on a sagebrush. And then, curled like a fragile question mark at the base of a pine tree, she lay, skin pale as moonlight, lips tinged blue, half alive, maybe less. He didn't pause to wonder who she was or why she'd ended up in a blizzard fierce enough to freeze a coyote solid. He simply scooped her up and carried her through the snow as if she weighed nothing at all. Perhaps if he'd known the name she bore or the fortune she'd fled, he might have turned back, but he didn't. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if this story moves you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something truly special for you. Eli Tanner's cabin stood in the shadow of the Bitterroot Mountains like a whispered prayer cast into the wilderness. For 3 years, he'd lived alone on his 200 acres, nursing injured horses back to health. The solitude suited him perfectly. Animals didn't lie, the land didn't scheme. And the winter of 1887 had been unusually gentle for a man who preferred his own company. Until that horseshoe changed everything. The woman in his arms felt as fragile as a bird's wing, her breathing so faint he had to press his ear close to be sure she was still alive. Her dress, what little remained of it, had once been fine, silk perhaps, now torn and frozen stiff with ice and mud. Beneath the tattered fabric, he glimpsed something that made his brow furrow. The remnants of what looked like a wedding gown, ivory satin, now dulled to a ghostly gray. "My body can warm you," he murmured, more to himself than to her unconscious form, as he kicked open the cabin door. The words weren't born of desire, but of necessity, frontier pragmatism that could mean the difference between life and death. He'd seen too many men perish from cold to believe otherwise. Sometimes salvation came down to skin against skin, shared warmth in the face of merciless elements. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, stoked the fire until it roared like a living beast, and spent the next 3 days nursing her back from the edge of oblivion. She woke on the 4th morning, violet eyes wide with terror, until they found his face. "Where am I?" Her voice carried the refined tones of an Eastern upbringing. Each word was shaped with care, betraying finishing schools and drawing rooms. "Safe," Eli said simply. "Name's Eli Tanner. This is my place." She introduced herself as Clara Whitman, claimed she'd been working as a governess for a family in Helena before fleeing some unnamed danger. But Eli noticed things. The way she held a teacup, pinky extended just so. How she instinctively smoothed her skirts when she sat, as if expecting yards of expensive fabric. The soft condition of her hands, unmarked by the kind of labor that left permanent calluses. And then there was the ring. She thought she'd hidden it well. A gold signet with an intricate crest, wrapped in torn cloth beneath her makeshift pillow. But Eli had sharp eyes and sharper instincts. He'd seen that particular design before, carved into the headstone of the wealthiest grave in Missoula's Evergreen Cemetery, the Whitaker family crest. He said nothing. Whatever secrets Clara Whitman carried, she'd share them when she was ready, or she wouldn't. Either way, she was welcome to stay as long as she needed. What he didn't expect was how quickly she'd weave herself into the fabric of his carefully ordered life. Spring came early that year, melting the snow in rushing torrents that turned every creek into a river and every river into a threat. Clara had been with Eli for 2 months by then, her strength returning along with color to her cheeks. She'd taken to helping with the horses. Her touch was gentle but confident in a way that spoke of experience with fine bloodstock. "You've done this before," Eli observed one morning, watching her examine the hoof of his prized mare, Solus. Clara's hands stilled for just a moment. "My previous employer kept horses. I learned by watching." Another careful half-truth. Eli was collecting them like stones in his pocket, each one adding weight to his growing certainty that Clara Whitman was not who she claimed to be. But Lord, how she was changing his world. She hummed while she worked, filling the cabin with melodies he'd never heard but somehow knew by heart. She cooked with herbs she'd gathered herself, turning his simple fare into meals that tasted like hope. And in the evenings, when the work was done and they sat by the fire, she told stories of distant places with such vivid detail that Eli could almost smell the sea salt and jasmine she described. "Tell me about before," she said one night, her voice soft in the firelight. Before this place, before the solitude. Eli's jaw tightened. His past was a wound that had never properly healed, a tangle of family loyalty and betrayal that had driven him to this isolated corner of Montana. "Not much to tell. Had a different life once. Didn't suit me." "Did someone hurt you?" The question was gentle but cut deep. "Someone I trusted." The words came out rougher than he intended. "My cousin built an empire on other men's backs, then tried to buy mine when I wouldn't bend the knee. Nathaniel Crane. Maybe you've heard of him." The color drained from Clara's face so quickly that Eli leaned forward, concerned. "You all right?" Yes, just tired." She rose abruptly, her movements unsteady. "I think I'll turn in early." But Eli saw her hands shake as she lit her candle, saw the way she pressed her back against her bedroom door, as if barricading herself inside. And later, when he thought she was asleep, he heard her crying, soft, desperate sounds that tore at his heart. He didn't know that Clara Whitman was really Charlotte Elizabeth Whitaker, daughter of the late mining magnate Silas Whitaker, heir to the largest gold fortune in the American West. He didn't know that she'd fled her own wedding rather than marry Nathaniel Crane, the same Nathaniel Crane who was Eli's arranged cousin, the man who destroyed Eli's faith and family forever. All Eli knew was that the woman sleeping 20 feet away had somehow become more precious to him than his own life, and that her tears felt like stones crushing his chest. The next morning brought a spring storm that turned the world into sheets of driving rain. Clara was helping Eli move the horses to higher ground when lightning spooked his stallion Thunder. The animal reared, hooves flashing dangerously close to Clara's head. Without thinking, she grabbed Thunder's bridle and spoke to him in rapid, fluent French, the kind of equestrian commands used in European riding. The stallion calmed immediately, responding to it with the trained obedience of a mount accustomed to aristocratic handling. Eli stared at her, rain plastering his dark hair to his skull. "Where did you learn to do that?" Clara's eyes went wide as she realized her mistake. The family I worked for had French riding masters." Eli's voice was quiet, but something dangerous lurked beneath the surface. "Clara, who are you really?" For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted, and he saw the truth hovering there like a bird ready to take flight. But then her walls slammed back into place. "I'm exactly who I said I am, a governess, nothing more." But as they ran for the cabin through the pounding rain, Eli caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Tucked into Clara's bodice, revealed by the storm's violence, was a letter bearing an official seal. And though the ink had run, he could still make out enough words to understand. Charlotte Whitaker. Missing reward. His Clara was not Clara at all. She was Charlotte Whitaker, the missing heiress every bounty hunter from Spokane to Salt Lake City was searching for. And if the rumors were true, she was worth more money than Eli could make in 10 lifetimes. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Sheriff Amos Briggs arrived on a Tuesday, his badge glinting in the afternoon sun like a warning. Eli met him at the property line, keeping his body language casual while his mind raced. "Afternoon, Tanner." Briggs touched the brim of his hat. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Eli's hand rested easy on his gun belt, but his eyes never left the sheriff's face. "Looking for someone, young woman, 22, dark hair, violet eyes, goes by the name Charlotte Whitaker. Rich families offering a substantial reward for her safe return." "Can't say I've seen anyone matching that description." "Been a quiet winter." The lie came smooth as silk. Briggs studied him with the calculating gaze of a man who'd spent 20 years reading faces. "Funny thing about rich families, Tanner. They got long arms and deep pockets, make for powerful friends and dangerous enemies. I'll keep that in mind." After the sheriff left, Eli found Charlotte in the garden, her hands buried in soil that would soon bloom with vegetables to feed them through the coming year. She looked up at his approach, and he saw she already knew. "He was looking for me, wasn't he?" Eli nodded. "Charlotte Whitaker. That's your real name?" Yes. The word came out barely above a whisper. And the family offering the reward? My father died 6 months ago. The estate, I'm worth approximately $2 million. Eli felt the number hit him like a physical blow. He'd known she was wealthy, but this was beyond wealthy. This was power. This was the kind of money that could buy senators and judges who could crush a simple cowboy like him without even trying. Why did you run? Charlotte's laugh held no humor. Because my father promised me to Nathaniel Crane in exchange for backing a railroad deal. Because Nathaniel Crane is the kind of man who collects beautiful things and destroys them slowly. Because I would rather die free than live as his prized possession. Nathaniel Crane. Eli's blood turned to ice in his veins. Charlotte, he said carefully. Nathaniel Crane is my cousin. The color drained from her face. What? My mother was a Crane before she married my father. Nathaniel and I grew up together, worked together for 3 years before I learned what he really was. He tried to buy my loyalty when I threatened to expose his business practices. When I refused, he destroyed my reputation and drove me out of Helena. Charlotte was staring at him as if he'd grown a second head. You're related to the man I was supposed to marry. By blood, not by choice. Eli's voice hardened. I haven't spoken to Nathaniel in 4 years, and I'd be happy to go another 4 without hearing his name. They stood in the garden, the weight of revelation heavy between them. Eli could see Charlotte's mind working, calculating the implications of this impossible coincidence. You could turn me in, she said finally. Collect the reward. $2 million would set you up for life. I could. Will you? Eli reached down and pulled a handful of weeds from the earth, his movements deliberate and slow. Charlotte, when I carried you out of that snow, I didn't do it because I thought you might be worth something. I did it because you were a human being who needed help. That hasn't changed. Even knowing who you are, even knowing what Nathaniel will do to you if he finds out you're protecting me. Eli met her eyes, especially knowing that. But their conversation was cut short by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Charlotte grabbed Eli's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. He's found me, she whispered. The rider who emerged from the tree line wasn't Nathaniel Crane, but he might as well have been. Tall, impeccably dressed despite the long journey, with the calculating eyes of a professional hunter. He dismounted with fluid grace and approached them with a smile that never reached his eyes. Good afternoon, Silas Crawford, Crawford Investigations. I'm looking for Miss Charlotte Whitaker, on behalf of her concerned fiancé, Mr. Nathaniel Crane. Charlotte stepped behind Eli, her presence at his back both comfort and burden. Haven't seen anyone by that name, Eli said evenly. Crawford's smile widened. Of course not, though I must say, you have excellent taste in household help, Mr. Tanner. Your governess bears a striking resemblance to my client. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Crawford knew exactly who Charlotte was. Mr. Crane is prepared to be very generous with anyone who assists in Miss Whitaker's safe return, Crawford continued. $50,000 to be precise. Cash, more money than most men see in a lifetime. 50,000. Eli felt Charlotte's hand find his, her fingers ice cold despite the warm afternoon. Not interested, Eli said. Perhaps you'd like some time to consider. I said no. Crawford's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. Mr. Crane can be a valuable friend, Mr. Tanner, but he makes a very dangerous enemy. I'd hate to see harm come to your livestock. The threat to his horses was clear. Eli's hand moved to his gun, and Crawford raised his hands in mock surrender. No need for unpleasantness. I'll be in town for a few days if you change your mind. He remounted his horse with the same fluid grace. Oh, and Mr. Tanner, Mr. Crane asked me to give you his regards. Family should stick together, don't you think? After Crawford disappeared into the distance, Charlotte turned to Eli with tears streaming down her face. I have to leave, she said. I won't let Nathaniel destroy you the way he's destroyed everyone else who's gotten in his way. But Eli pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. You're not going anywhere. Eli, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. I love you, Charlotte Whitaker. Not your money or your family name. You. And I'll be damned if I let Nathaniel Crane take one more thing that matters to me. The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. And when Charlotte rose on her tiptoes to kiss him, Eli tasted salt from her tears. And something else, something that tasted like hope. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "But love might not be enough. Then we'll make it enough." But even as they held each other in the garden they'd planted together, both knew that Crawford's visit was just the beginning. Nathaniel Crane didn't make threats lightly, and he never accepted defeat graciously. The war for Charlotte's freedom and their love was about to begin. The papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by a nervous clerk who couldn't meet Eli's eyes. Eli read them twice, his jaw tightening with each word. "Mental incompetence hearing," he said, his voice flat. "Nathaniel is claiming you're not fit to manage your own affairs." Charlotte's hands shook as she took the documents. "And you? Kidnapping, extortion, corrupting a mentally incompetent woman." Eli's laugh was bitter. "He's covering all his bases. They're going to hang you." The words came out as a broken whisper. "Not if we fight back." Charlotte looked up at him with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "How do you fight a man who owns half the judges in Montana Territory?" "By taking away what he wants most." Eli's voice was steady, but Charlotte could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. What do you mean?" "Federal court, Missoula. You publicly renounce your inheritance, all of it, remove Nathaniel's motivation, and his case falls apart." "Eli, that's $2 million. "I know." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she was shedding. "Worth every penny to keep you free." The journey to Missoula took 4 days, traveling through back country to avoid the bounty hunters Crawford had surely hired. They slept under stars that seemed dimmer than usual, as if the weight of their situation had leached light from the very sky. On the third night, camped beside a stream that sang softly over smooth stones, Charlotte asked the question that had been haunting her. "What if we lose?" Eli was quiet for so long she thought he hadn't heard. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Then we lose together. Nathaniel will have you killed, maybe," she said, "but he'll have to live with knowing he never really won." "You'll never love him, Charlotte. Not if he threatens me. Not if he threatens the whole territory, and that will eat him alive." Charlotte reached for the chain around her neck, pulling out the ring she'd hidden for so long. The Whitaker family crest caught the firelight, throwing dancing shadows across her palm. "My great-grandmother commissioned this," she said. "Rebecca Whitaker. She was 16 when she came west, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a dream of gold. Built the family fortune from scratch, married for love, raised 5 children who all knew the value of hard work." She looked at Eli across the fire. "She'd understand what we're doing." Eli pulled something from his pocket, the cracked horseshoe he'd found the morning he discovered Charlotte in the snow. Over the months, he'd worked the metal, heating and shaping it in his forge until it resembled a ring. "Save this," he said, offering it to her. "Figured it brought me the best luck of my life." Charlotte took the rough iron band, her fingers tracing the imperfect curves. "It's perfect." "Charlotte Elizabeth Whitaker," Eli said, his voice formal despite their informal surroundings. "Will you marry me? Not for your money or your name, but because I can't imagine a life without you in it." "Yes," she whispered, slipping the iron ring onto her finger. "Yes, 1,000 times." They were married that night under a canopy of stars, with only the stream as witness and their love as bond. No preacher, no papers, just 2 souls, choosing each other in defiance of a world that would tear them apart. The federal courthouse in Missoula buzzed with activity the next morning. Word had spread that the missing Whitaker heiress would appear, and every newspaper from Chicago to San Francisco had sent reporters. Charlotte walked through the crowd with her head held high, Eli's hands steady at her back. Nathaniel Crane sat in the front row, immaculate in his tailored suit, surrounded by lawyers who looked like hunting dogs straining at their leashes. When Charlotte entered, his eyes lit with predatory satisfaction. "Charlotte, darling," he called out, rising to his feet. "Thank God you're safe. We've all been so worried." Charlotte didn't even glance his way. Instead, she approached the judge's bench with the bearing of the aristocrat she'd been born to be. "Your Honor, I am Charlotte Elizabeth Whitaker, daughter of Silas Whitaker, heir to the Whitaker mining fortune. I stand before you today of my own free will, in full possession of my mental faculties, to make a legal declaration. Judge Harrison Pierce, a man known for his integrity and immunity to bribery, leaned forward with interest. Proceed, Miss Whitaker. I hereby renounce all claim to the Whitaker fortune. Every mine, every acre of land, every ounce of gold, I give it freely to the territory of Montana to be used for schools, hospitals, and roads that will serve the common good. The courthouse erupted. Nathaniel shot to his feet, his face flushed with rage. She's not competent to make such a decision. She's been brainwashed, coerced. By whom? Charlotte's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. By the man who saved my life, who asked for nothing in return, who loved me when I had nothing to offer but myself. She turned to face Nathaniel for the first time, her violet eyes blazing with defiance. You want to know why I ran from our wedding, Nathaniel? Because I saw what you did to your first wife, how she died in that riding accident, just weeks after she discovered your illegal mining operations. Because I'd rather live in poverty with a man who respects me than die in luxury with one who sees me as property. You're delusional, am I? Charlotte pulled a leather portfolio from her bag. These are copies of ledgers from your Helena operation, records of claim jumping, worker murders, judge bribing. I've been collecting evidence for months. Insurance, you might say. Nathaniel's face had gone ashen. Those are forgeries, authenticated by handwriting experts in 3 states. Charlotte's smile was sharp as a winter wind. The federal marshal should be arresting you any moment now. As if summoned by her words, uniformed officers entered the courthouse. Nathaniel looked around wildly, but his escape routes had been cut off. Charlotte, he snarled, you have no idea what you've done. I'll destroy him for murder, for fraud, for threatening federal witnesses. Justice moves slowly, Nathaniel, but it moves. Judge Pierce banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. When the chaos finally settled, he looked at Charlotte with something like admiration. Miss Whitaker, your renunciation is accepted and recorded. You are free to make your own choices regarding marriage and residence. He turned to the federal marshals. Take Mr. Crane into custody. As Nathaniel was led away in chains, he caught Charlotte's eye one last time. This isn't over, he mouthed. But Charlotte just smiled and took Eli's hand, the iron horseshoe ring catching the courthouse light like a promise. The news reached them on a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year later. Eli found Charlotte in their expanded garden, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their first child grew. Nathaniel is dead, he said simply. Charlotte looked up from the pumpkins she'd been inspecting. How? Crane challenged another prisoner over a gambling debt. Always let his pride get the better of him. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently stroking her stomach. I should feel something, she said finally. Relief, maybe? Or sadness? Something? What do you feel? Free. She smiled up at him, that radiant expression that still made his heart skip, completely, utterly free. Their homestead had grown over the year. Eli had used Charlotte's remaining savings, the small amount she'd kept for emergencies, to buy adjoining land from a neighbor heading back east. They ran cattle now alongside the horses, and Charlotte had started a small business breeding and training riding horses for wealthy families in Helena and Missoula. The locals called her the Lady of the Horseshoe, partly for the iron ring she never removed, and partly for the luck she seemed to bring to everyone she met. Neighbors brought her sick animals and family disputes with equal confidence in her wisdom. She was, they said, proof that true nobility had nothing to do with money. Tell me about the day you found me again, Charlotte said, settling against Eli's side as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. Eli chuckled. You've heard this story 100 times. Tell me anyway. It started with a horseshoe. Eli began, his voice taking on the cadence of a favorite bedtime story. Cracked and rimmed in ice, lying crooked in the snow just past the north fence. Charlotte closed her eyes and listened, one hand on her belly and the other entwined with Eli's. In her other life, she'd owned silk dresses worth more than most families made in a year. She'd had servants and carriages and a private box at the opera. Now she had calloused hands and a wardrobe consisting mainly of practical cotton dresses. She had a husband who smelled of horses and leather, a cabin that was warm but simple, and a future that held no promises beyond love and hard work. She'd never been richer. "Do you ever regret it?" Eli asked quietly. "Giving up all that money?" Charlotte opened her eyes and looked at him. "Really?" She looked at the lines around his eyes from squinting into the prairie sun, at the scar on his chin from a long-ago tangle with barbed wire, at the hands that had pulled her from death and taught her what love actually meant. "Nathaniel was right about one thing," she said. "I am the richest woman in the West. I just found my fortune in a different place than he expected." Eli leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Reckon that horseshoe brought us both more luck than we deserved." "No," Charlotte said, a voice soft but certain. "It brought us exactly what we had the courage to choose." As the first stars appeared in the Montana sky, Charlotte thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, terrified, running, worth $2 million, and feeling completely worthless. Then she thought about the woman she was now, pregnant, in love, owning little more than the clothes on her back, and feeling like she could buy and sell the world. Sometimes the most valuable things couldn't be measured in gold. Sometimes they could only be measured in horseshoes and heartbeats, in morning coffee shared over a scarred wooden table, in the promise of children who would know what it meant to be free. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and snow from the high country. Winter was coming again, but Charlotte wasn't afraid. She had Eli's arms around her, their child growing beneath her heart, and a love that had been tested by everything the world could throw at it. She'd traded an empire for a homestead, a fortune for freedom, a name for anonymity. It was the best deal she'd ever made, and it had all started with a horseshoe, cracked and rimmed in ice, lying crooked in the snow just past the north fence. A broken thing that had somehow brought two broken people together and made them whole. Outside, thunder nickered softly in his stall, and Charlotte smiled. Even the horses knew they were home.